Yo, what's good everybody? Welcome to my video and the channel. My name is Alchemy. We're going to be taking a look at how to approach 90s/2000s intelligent drum and bass that sounds kind of like this.
Recording to logbook.
So if that's really interesting to you, then be sure to stick around for the video. I'm going to try to not go like super crazy in depth, but give you the general synopsis about how to approach this. Really, this track only has, well, only three things going on in this entire section right here. So we need to basically cover the drums, we need to cover the pad, and we need to cover the bass, and all of that is relatively simple. So I'm actually going to start with the easiest version first, or the easiest thing rather, which is the amen break. And what you need to do really in order to get something interesting is to just grab a classic, Amen Brother type breakbeat, or you can use any breakbeat really, but you really just want to practice getting to the chopping board, because if you look at this as a whole, if I were to just look at the original groove, is just this. And what I've done is, instead of doing some crazy processing and trying to like do everything from scratch, like you'll see that most of this is pretty much carrying the entire tune. I have added a couple of other loops and stuff that you can kind of fill for extra rhythm and sections, but the beauty behind this is really getting down and dirty with chopping breaks. And this is something that I feel like you should be practicing anyways, because the skill itself is, if you make any kind of hip hop or anything that's electronic that involves drums other than like techno, and even then sometimes in techno, this is a skill that you should be cultivating, because you can put anything over this and it will pretty much sound good. So what I've done is I've pretty much just chopped this break into different sections and stuff to where I was like, oh, it sounds really good. So with that, the only actual processing that I've done to this is I've used the knock plugin, just because it covers a lot of the bases that I actually need in order for this to be useful. And you can do this totally without this plugin. It's just that this is a really nice array of effects that, I don't know, man, this plugin just works really good for breaks and stuff, because it has a lot of things that you might need in order to like beef a break up, or drums in general. But you can always use a transient shaper, distortion. The sub maker is relatively unique. We'll talk about that in just a second. You can use some kind of OTT or whatever to give yourself more air, or the, what is that from Slate Digital, air or something, and then a clipper. But one thing that is kind of handy with the knock plugin is that if this is turned on, then it will recognize what is a kick, and you can actually add a little tiny bit of sub to it. So that gives you a shortcut to where normally what most people do is they'll actually add in a very short, clean kick to this, and usually sometimes a snare fundamental over the kicks and snares. But for this in particular, I just wanted the kick, because that's really what the driving force of this is, and I don't really feel like the snare needs a fundamental in order to like have that same kind of feel. That layering style is also relatively, I don't want to say new, but I feel like that was post 2000 era, especially when you're talking about layering like drum breaks and stuff and drum and bass. So you don't even need it, but sometimes that can be helpful. With that though, yeah, if you have the knock plugin, then that makes it really easy to do. But I haven't done anything else other than that, other than some automation for an effect later down the line. That's pretty much it. Just use a drum break. So with that, let's talk about the most complicated part now, which is the pads. And the pads are a resample of this video that I did for the Silent Hill pads 2 videos ago. And really what the original patch is, if we take a look at this, is just this type of sound. So let's go ahead and unsolo that. And if you want to figure out how to make that, then you can just go watch the video, so that way I don't have to explain it again. Long story short, grab a bunch of different saw stacks, detune the heck out of them, add a fifth, add some chorus, and a band pass, you're pretty much good to go. So one thing with this though, and the reason why this becomes important, is because we actually want to resample a chord, which is what I've done here. And if we take a listen to what this sounds like, I haven't really done any other processing to this other than, let me see if I have done anything in specific. Nope, nothing really. And in fact, I think that this isn't supposed to be where it is, but if we take a listen to this. So I just randomly resampled this onto here and put this down into the drum groove of a different video that I did. But really, this is what you're going for, is you want to try to get something that's kind of phasey and like a chord, because what you're going to do after that is take something like this and you want to throw this into a sampler. So let me figure out where that is over here. We'll scroll back. It's kind of funny that I did both of this in the same project file, but what this is exactly as described. It's just another, it's pretty much a chord stack, but now I'm pretty much just making and playing around with the same kind of scale. So that way it sounds a little bit more interesting. So if I were to play this, maybe with different sounds, it sounds very Metroid-like. Now, one thing that I did do is I added a little bit of EQ, which is just dynamic EQ, because this is going to stack pretty hard. So as you can see, it can get kind of peaky and resonant there. So you want to be careful of that. To kind of further remedy this, I've added some compression to it. And then I've added a touch of reverb, which I like using crystalline. Shout out to Baby Audio. I recently reviewed all their plugins kind of like in a two-pack system thing. And crystalline is by far my favorite reverb to use right now. It just sounds so nice. So with that, I mean, that's pretty much it for the pad. You don't really have to do a whole lot else, but if for whatever reason you wanted to make something like this again, then what we can do is we can just find a chord in a sample pack. If it's a triad, then it works really well. If it's not a triad, then a seventh. So diminished seventh would probably be wild, but let's see what this A sharp chord is. So something like this could probably work. So if we were to throw this into here, and this is at E flat major, so we want to go to D sharp, and we can set a loop here to pull this out, and we really just want to find a section right here that's going to give us a continuous loop, and we can set this to ping pong back and forth. So now with this, we want to give ourselves a little bit of mix so that way it's not clicking. There we go.
Recording to logbook.
So now what we can do is we can play this at a lower octave and see what comes about from this. So So as you can see, even though the chord is a major chord, just by kind of playing and transposing the entire chord as a whole, you can get some really cool stuff. So if I were to apply the same process, I'm going to skip the mixing aspect of it and just add some reverb to it. I changed my mind. We're actually going to add some delay to this. So we can use like Comeback Kid, or we could use the kilohertz delay, maybe the dual delay. This is another one of my favorites here. We can set the duck here, but if we want it to be more plucky, I can already hear it. Right? Pretty simple. If you want, you can add reverb to it as well. It doesn't really matter, but that's one of the simplest ways to achieve kind of like this whole chord thing. And I guess I wanted to like show you something from scratch, but also show you what I did, so that way like it's driving the point home. It's really about the concept of taking a chord and throwing that into the sampler and then playing around with different notes, because you're transposing the whole chord as opposed to trying to write super complex chord progressions. And that's just kind of like one of the big aesthetics of this genre in particular. So with that, the other thing that I wanted to relate with finally is making an 808 type sound from scratch. Now this isn't like a trap 808, it's a much more simple, just like boom. So that sounds like this. It's really simple, really. It's just a sine wave. There is a little bit of a filter on here that is just controlling the cutoff. And so what this is doing is just kind of like opening up a little bit with the distortion after it and then pulling it down. So if we were to turn this off, you can see that it's still pretty much the same sound, but it just adds a little bit more character to it. You can also even add some resonance if you want to shape it into something different. And that will give you kind of like that acid sound, but I don't really feel like that's necessary. But that's really all you have to do. Turn the limiter up to make it a little bit louder. And the thing with this is we kind of want to play a rhythm that's in key with this. So this chord is relatively simple. It's really just 2 chords, but if you listen to the bass line, I'm really just trying to create a secondary rhythm that is playing along with the drums. So and that's pretty much it. I don't even have these sidechained. You can sidechain if you want to, but for this particular genre, I don't really feel like it's necessary. I think these drums and like the relationship between all of this sounds good on its own anyways. But look, that's 3 tracks. That's all you have to do. All this other stuff that we have is really just elaboration and trying to add more elements to make it a little bit more interesting. So for example, I've got this cool little fill right here. This is just the same drums pitched up. This is an octave up. This is a Sakahachin. And what this really comes into after, as far as building the whole track, is just playing with call and response and just trying to create a vibe. And one really cool thing about song structure that you can use with this genre in particular is you'll notice that I have this like kind of alternating pattern here where I am starting off with the drums being at normal pitch, and then this pitches up, and then I guess everything pitches up an octave. And sometimes that's a really easy thing that you can do, or that's something that a lot of this genre has done in the past, and also I guess with every genre. But the call is the lower octave, then the response is the higher octave, and you just create this cool little like, we're over here, now we're over here. So sorry for the distortion. Then that's it, the tune is done. And then really it just comes down to your creative chopping, which is why I love this genre so much. And what I also love about this genre is that if you can do jungle, you can do IDM, because that's really what IDM came from, is chopping breaks and chopping all different kinds of sounds, really, in the same way that you would process, you know, doing cool drum fills and whatnot, but using different sounds instead and creating more of staccato type feel as opposed to like that cool, right? But anyways, that's pretty much how you make this kind of music. It's really relatively simple, and I think that I may have even over-explained some stuff, but if you got something out of it, I would love it if you liked the video and left a comment saying what you learned about it, or maybe ways that you like to go about making this genre. And if you have any questions, you can always leave it in the comment below. If you want to support this channel, I would always love it if you checked out alchemy.com. I've got tons of presets with really cool neuro basses and stuff that kind of sound kind of like this. So, but they're in patch form. They're not really samples. But yeah, other than that, you could book a lesson with me if you're wanting to figure out how to explore some of these genres that I've been covering as of late. But thank you all so much. I really appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next one.